Okay, in the last video, I'm going to go ahead and do a follow-on. Thanks again for watching. My name is Tim with How Do I Do This 01. We're going to go ahead and continue on with the series for basic tools because I do want to cover just a couple more quick things. So far I've shown you all the basic tools, some of the neat intricacies that you can do with them. One is laying things on your canvas. You can resize your canvas. You can go in and you can stretch, skew, and twist by using your drop downs. Again, this is covered on an earlier series of videos on your menu drop downs. Please go see those videos because you need to be familiar with all these drop downs here, because each one of these has different functions, and each one of these functions will change depending upon what you're doing. You notice some of these are grayed out, some of these are visible, some of these are not. And again, the options can and will change. Now, you notice here on the image, the drop down, these are going to be of particular importance in this video because it's going to allow you to flip, rotate, skew, invert colors, and attributes is basically change your canvas size or resize the picture. Now, I'm going to cover this quickly because quite honestly, people go in and they don't realize that you can resize something. Now, you can do it quickly or you can do it slowly. If you click here and you select this and you change these numbers here, it's going to cut off the section of this particular painting. So if it's 800 by 600 and I go down to 400 by 300, half of the painting is going to turn up missing here. So I don't want to lose what it is I put on my canvas. Okay, suppose I just want to resize it. If I want to resize it, you have to go through a specific step. That would be clicking your selection tool, clicking edit, clicking select all. Then go down here, and within the selection tool, you notice the moving tool here. I can move it around, and you should notice the background color there. Let's go ahead and change the background color to white. Oh, let's go ahead and undo that real quick. Let's go ahead and go back to black and white. We're on the thing. Let's click select all. Now you notice I can move it around and it's moving, and the background color is white, so it's not doing funky things. Now I can move it up here to the corner, and this will allow me to resize it down to a certain point. However, suppose I want to make it smaller. Now I can set this right over to the edge, which is cool because I can set my fixed point. My fixed point in Paint is always going to be the top left. Okay. Other programs will have a ground or an anchor point, if you will. The ground or the anchor point is going to be wherever your program is going to default to 0. Now in this particular program, you'll notice if you go down here to your status bar, you'll notice the numbers go up here to the left until you get all the way down to 0. 0 is your ground or your anchor point. In Paint, it's always the top left corner. In other programs, it may be on the bottom left. And in some, it gives you flexibility to even change the anchor point, such as the Paint.net program is going to allow you to move things and change your anchor point. So these are things that you need to know and you need to become both familiar with and comfortable with. If you're not familiar and not comfortable with them, it's going to get confusing later on. So please practice this, learn it, and understand it. Now getting back to the selection, we can go back here, we can select it all. We can take the selection and we can move it around. So let's move it up here, and we're trying to resize. Now you notice I can only move this up so far, but I want to make it into something smaller. This is 800 by 600. That's a pretty big picture. If I'm doing something like an icon, or if I'm doing something like an avatar or something as a display picture, or something smaller on say a web page. Web pages, you don't want to go 600 by 800 unless you want it covering the whole screen, which is great, but it takes forever to upload and it takes a lot of memory. So if you resize by going down here, now you notice it's all selected. Now I can go up here and I can just drag it up and I'll squish it, which is something you do in my gradient lesson on an earlier video. But what I want to do here is I want to go down here to the bottom right corner. Now remember, the top corner, the top left is the anchor, the bottom corner is your floating section. Now you'll notice here there's a bright dot right here below this cursor. And you've got the little dotted line, there's a dot, and in the corner there's a dot, up here there's a dot. This is going to allow me to do something very quickly. Once I've selected all, and I can get the cursor to change here to change size. Now you'll notice at the top corner, there's also, okay, if I hadn't moved this up into the corner, you'll notice that the dotted line will also be across the top as well. Now if you'll notice, I'm going right here, and you'll notice that it's 400. See the status bar. Now if I want to resize this 400, I can quickly do it by just going to these dots and cutting it in half. Now you'll notice 300 by 400, and I've effectively cut it in half, 401 by 301. So it's basically half its normal size. Now I've gone ahead and done that, and if I set that there, I've resized it, which is great. I've resized the picture the way I wanted. Now I did move it a little bit, but that's okay. The point here is you can resize, but in the process of resizing, all of a sudden I've got all this white canvas. But if you'll notice, once I've set it, these little dots appear again. Now, rather than going in here and changing my attributes, I don't have to do that. I can go down here to this floating point again, and you'll notice the little angle arrow, your cursor changes from an arrow. I can go up here, and I can change this down to half, which is 300 by 400. Okay, 301 by 401. I've effectively cut the picture in half, or resized it down to half its original size. Something very useful for you to learn and use. Again, when you're working with this, I haven't mentioned it yet, but I've mentioned it in my earlier videos. If you haven't already seen them, please go watch them. The one thing I do emphasize is that you practice and that you save. These are two critical ingredients whenever you're working in any program. If you forget to save, you're in trouble, because you're going to miss a step, you're going to do things, and if you don't practice good habits now, you're not going to have good habits later. If you don't have good habits, you're going to wind up taking shortcuts and losing bunches of information. It's better to save your work often and go back, because you can always pick up where you left off if you've saved. If you haven't saved it, all of a sudden you're going to wind up, in any program you're using, you're going to wind up losing hours of data. If you go through and you don't save your work in another program such as Excel or things like that, if you don't practice these habits, you're going to regret it. It's that simple. Now let's go ahead and move on to something else here. We're not going to end this. We're just going to go back to my dogs here. Now you'll notice I've got 3 windows open here, and I've selected the different things. Now this is kind of a pretty background. Say I like that, but I want to put the dogs on top. I like this, and I want to have a dog with a shadow on top of the pink lettering here. How do I get this to do that? Well, I've got the painting here open in another paint window. What I can do is click my selection tool, go to this one, click my selection tool, make sure that it's set to transparent background, and then if I go back here and I use my selection tool, I can select the area, right click within the selection and copy it. I can then move over here and go down to the other window that's still open, and I can right click and I can paste. Now I can move that down. Now you'll notice the background color is staying that particular color. Why? Because the background color is black. So let's go ahead, undo that real quickly. Let's change back to a primary color of black, background of white. Because the background is now white, it will come up and it will be transparent. So if I use my Control V, this is going to give me the effect that I want. Okay? Now, go ahead and practice this. Use it, have fun. Thanks again for tuning in. Please rate me and comment or ask me questions.